Welcome back to Automation Airwaves. I'm your host, Scott Teeple, and we're continuing our discussion on integrated automation and intelligent automation. And we're in episode 3, and we're going to be discussing the use case and bringing the human back into the automation process. And if you missed it, the first episode was more of the definition and how Agilify defines it, and the second was the technology and all the pieces that make it up.
Darren, could you kind of just take us through a little bit of our use case with, I think it's Redilo fixed asset, and some of the experiences that you're seeing as we discuss this.
Yeah, and before I talk about Redilo fixed assets, I want to talk about the customer landscape that we're seeing on the sales side. All these different technologies really are almost as if they're building blocks, right? So we're going to start with the RPAs, the RDAs, then we're going to start to add in machine learning, the cognitive learning. Eventually we'll get to AI, whatever that might mean to you. But most of our customers are still focused on kind of back office processing, the RPA space, right? We've got a couple of customers that are starting to mature, including one of our largest customers, and that's where we start to introduce this concept of Redilo fixed assets. And fixed assets is a process that's from end to end very ripe for this integrated automation concept, right? We've got a lot of human interaction, but also a lot of back office processing, data gathering, things like that. So really stepping back and looking at the way that a user is working throughout an entire day, reimagining a day in the life of what is Redilo, and kind of trying to tie all of those things together. So recognizing that we can't completely eliminate the human to date, but rather giving them all of the tools, whether it's existing RPA, RDA solutions, kind of tying them all together, maybe creating some APIs or leveraging some APIs and creating some custom SQL queries, right? And kind of pulling all those things together to present a user with an interface, the orchestration layer, and all the information they need to be able to make decisions in real time. Once you can kind of get to that point, then you can start layering in machine learning, cognitive learning, to make those next best action decisions. So a lot of our customers are going in that direction, but I think most often we're finding that some customers do come to us and say, hey, I'm brand new to automation, tell me about AI. And trying to walk them backwards and help them understand the framework that we need to establish to get to that point.
Yeah, the building blocks, right? And
exactly.
There's probably hundreds of articles over the last year that really dive into data is king. Data. However you want to splice this thing out, right? And if you don't have that data, my recommendation is you don't start looking at cognitive, or you don't start looking at machine learning, or you don't start looking into a knowledge domain of narrow AI until you're confident that not only do you have a business process that is ready for it, but then you have the data to even support it. But how do you get the data if you don't have it today? Well, that's what we've been talking about for the last 4 years, within, these channels, is around RPA and RDA, because it starts building out the corpus of the data modeling that you need to really start laying the foundation for what you need to move forward.
But the paradigm shift of the Redilo use case was the fact that we knew that there's no way that we could pull the human out of it. There's too much research, there's too many decisions, there's too much that needed to be done in the fixed asset and capitalizing assets in that space to try to cut the human out. So we went into the design by looking at, okay, not how do we minimize the human impact, how do we maximize the human impact?
Exactly.
How do we bring everything to the human and then enable the human to make more decisions instead of doing more of the rote keying? So it was a flip in paradigm that really made that stand out to the customer.
Yeah, I think it's a critical point here is that within your RDA and your RPA program, within one of the beginning stages of identification of process automation, you say, hey, these are ripe for automation today because we can get to the business logic, we can get to the rules, right. We can get to that task.
Quick, yeah.
All the things that go in to support that task, let's put those off to the side and let's not focus on those today. There's going to be a moment in time, Peter, to your point, it's like, hey, it's time for us to start looking at these. How do we start layering back in those human touch elements, those things that we need cognitive support for, or I need visualization in a decision or something, right? And that, to what we did with our customers was we said, hey, let's not just put those off to the side, but how do we start factoring that into how we actually start creating what would be an intelligent automation solution moving forward? So,
I think it's worth noting too that we didn't start there with this large customer of ours. Started way down in the back office, lots of RPA, as I mentioned earlier. You don't just show up on day one and start building this end-to-end Redilo type solution with all of these baked in ML AI type type solutions and keeping the human at the forefront, like Peter mentioned. There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, we already had the editing a fixed asset automation in place. We already had the creating a new project automation in place. All of those RPAs that were down at the task level were then used and utilized and brought in front of the human now for them to orchestrate and for them to say, I want to do this in real time. Okay, I've made the decision, now go do it. And they're not doing the keying, they already have this library of automations to work from, which a lot of companies do now in the market. They've been automating all of these processes, all these tasks. Sometimes we hear numbers of hundreds and things along those lines. All of those can now be leveraged if you draw them together in the right way, because really what we're finding is you can't do intelligent automation without a human, because the human is still the most intelligent being in the room.
Starts with them.
Yeah.
Right.
At least today.
At least today.
At least today, right? I mean, that's the promise, right? And I think that's the joke, and I want to continue to bring up the joke, right? Like, artificial intelligence is the future. That's not a joke. That is the truth. However, today it doesn't exist, right? We're making some great efforts. There's some really great tools that we've partnered with. There's a lot of great companies that are really out there solving this. And again, data is king, and the knowledge domain that needs to be there to be able to support decision, next best actions, if you will. We're making some great progress, but until we really get a complete picture around the problem statement itself, and do we have the data, I don't know that we'll get there today, tomorrow, maybe in the next couple of decades, but definitely making some great strides this time. So.